Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings. The goal of these briefings in my weekly radio show, Operation Freedom, is to provide you information the bought-off lamestream fake media will never touch, will never present. You can join us every Sunday. It's free, live, at Operation Freedom, the radio show. Great guests, great analysis, information the lamestream will never provide. All you have to do is go to davejanda.com, hit the upper right-hand corner, the listen button, and you'll be tuned in. Tune in 2 to 5 every Sunday. It's free. We're also available on this YouTube channel 24/7, obviously, and also available at the website davejanda.com. We have the free side, the public side, which we upload information on a regular basis. But where the real meat is on the subscription side. 30 cents a day, $9 a month. The $9 a month helps cover for our enhanced security costs we have on the site. This past week, there was an attempt to take down our site. Our site, because it is so secure, blocked it. And then what, if you will, these players decided to do was try to get on browsers and block access to our site because they could not penetrate our site. It takes a lot of cash, a lot of cash to develop a security system and the IT personnel to protect our content. And I believe our content is second to none when it comes to the analysis and the insight. So please join us at davejanda.com. Hope you'll become a part of our freedom family. Today I want to focus on the, if you will, the departure of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to split this into two parts. And the reason is because when we tend to do one single episode on Jeffrey Epstein, what tends to happen is that our YouTubes are not only demonetized, but they can't be found. So hopefully by splitting this into two parts, if you can't find one part, then go to, listen to that. There's a part one and a part two. I want to focus on the Jeffrey Epstein and him no longer being a viable entity as far as an information source. There are a couple things that happened right before his departure, which was announced on Saturday morning. On Wednesday, August 7th, Les Wexner, who we've spoken about before on this platform and also on our radio show Operation Freedom and also on the in our subscription service. Wexner is the head of L Brands, Limited Brands, the Limited, Victoria's Secret. Makes you wonder what Victoria's Secret really was. And Les Wexner was very close with Epstein. Epstein ran a lot of his money for decades. Wexner's position is, I had no idea he was doing this. Right, Les. Now, Les is 81, and he's going to probably feign a little bit of the Sicilian flu, although he'll probably label it more of the aged Sicilian flu, right? Oh, my memory, it's, I'm 81. Please forgive my forgetfulness. And, right. I saw him as a son, Jeffrey. Oh, Jeffrey. Yeah, right. Well, Wexner has been tied to intelligence agencies. Let's face it, we've spoken about this before. Actually, for years we've spoken about this and actually been denigrated for years that we're making too much about Epstein. Look, bottom line, Epstein was a front. He was working with the intelligence agencies. Which ones? CIA, Israeli Mossad, possibly MI6. He was a front. And his front was to entrap people into leverage positions, Hollywood moguls, politicians from both sides of the aisle, really one aisle, right? The Republicrats, owned and operated by the same globalist syndicate. One way they own them is through leverage, blackmail. Epstein was a part of that. In addition to folks on Wall Street and in addition to business leaders around the country and around the world. All these folks were pigs. They obviously had issues with having affection, if you will, for children in a sinister way. Epstein would have them come to his townhouse or Palm Beach or the Little St. James Island, the pedophile island, or down to the old ranch, El Zorro, or Zorro Ranch down in New Mexico. Bedrooms would be videotaped, audio taped, and then those videotapes and audio tapes would be used at a later time to advance the agenda of the deep state, of which the intelligence agencies around the world are a part of, working in collusion with each other, by the way. Wexner was the money behind Epstein. It's been said that that townhouse on 71st Street, which supposedly is the most expensive townhouse in New York, was actually owned by Wexner, gifted to Epstein in the past. Nobody can find out where Epstein made all of these hundreds of millions of dollars, a billion or so. I've spoken to folks, as I mentioned before, on Wall Street that are very networked. Folks in NYPD, he said, we don't have a handle. We can tell you where certain people made a lot of money. But for this guy to make this amount of money, become a whale, and us not know, just doesn't happen. This guy was a front. And one of the people that helped him become a front was this Wexner dude. So what happens on Wednesday is, out of the blue, Wexner comes out and says, and this was from Zero Hedge, billionaire Victoria's Secret owner Leslie Wexner says that Jeffrey Epstein misappropriated over $46 million of his fortune. Not even haircut money to this guy. I mean, this is a lot more than haircut money even to Wexner, right? This was reported in the Wall Street Journal. So good old Les Wexner is pulling the victim card. Oh, he took $46 million. And, well, when did this happen? L Brand's founder revealed on August 7th, Wednesday, letter to the Wexner Foundation that the missing funds were uncovered after a 2007 falling out he had with pedophile financier following allegations the sexual abuse of underage girls. He's just letting people know it happened in 2007. Then later in the article it says, well, in 2008, Epstein transferred $46 million. Well, wait a minute. In 2008, if he transferred $46 million, good old Les has to get his date straight if he's going to put out a press release, because he was talking about they uncovered in 2007, yet later in the article it says 2008 that all this occurred with the $46 million. Bottom line is, Wexner's in this up to his eyeballs, and he's trying to get himself out of it. Then on Friday evening, on August 9th, 2019, the Epstein documents hit. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals came in and said, you can start releasing the documents, which implicated a number of big-name folks, including former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell, Democrat, globalist. What difference does it make? New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, who was also the Secretary of Energy under good old Billy Clinton. A money manager, Glenn Dubin, big time, and an MIT professor, Marvin Minsky, just to name a few, along with, of course, good old Billy. It was confirmed that he had a private party on Pedophile Island. Many people were invited. Guest list is still pending. We also know from records that good old Billy was on the Lolita Express, the private jet of Epstein, from parts unknown to ending up in Pedophile Island at Little St. James Island, owned by Jeffrey Epstein, at least 26 to 27 times, and good old Hillary about a half a dozen times. This was actually uncovered initially, as it reported, through the NYPD and through actually Eric Prince in an interview where he gave actually as far back as November 2016 on Anthony Weiner's laptop. So this hit from Zero Hedge on Friday late afternoon. Epstein documents hit. Accuser says Trump didn't partake in any sex with any of us underage kids. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has ordered the partial release of what is expected to be approximately 2,000 pages of documents related to convicted pedophile sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The majority of the unsealing will be performed by U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska. The document release stems from a 2015 defamation lawsuit in New York brought by Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts-Giuffre against Epstein's madam, Ghislaine Maxwell. Wonder where she is. We'll talk about her in a minute. Giuffre says Maxwell helped Epstein traffic herself and other underage girls to sex parties at the billionaire pedophile's many residences. The case was settled in 2017 and the records were sealed, leading to an appeal by filmmaker and author Mike Cernovich, who later joined by the Miami Herald and several other parties. While Epstein ties to former President Bill Clinton and other famous figures are well known, all of whom have tried to distance themselves in recent weeks, much has been made about the relationship between President Trump and the pedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is key. Okay, this is the Friday before. This is a day before Epstein took a powder. Following a 2011 article by journalist Sharon Churcher claiming that Donald Trump was a, quote, good friend of Jeffrey's, end quote, Giuffre was asked to clarify Churcher's possible misquote that, quote, Donald Trump was also a good friend of Jeffrey's and that Trump didn't partake in any of the sex with any of us, but he flirted with me, end quote. Quote, it's true that he didn't partake in any sex with us, the underage women, kids, girls, but it's not true that he flirted with me. Donald Trump never flirted with me, end quote, said Jeffrey. So in other words, the day before Jeffrey Epstein departs, there's this confirmation by this Joffrey woman that Donald Trump not only didn't have sex with the kids, but wasn't even flirting with any of them. Okay. Far different from Billy Clinton holding parties on Pedophile Island, courtesy of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, that all hit on Friday. Saturday morning, as you know, August 10th, 2019, from Zero Hedge, Jeffrey Epstein dead in apparent suicide. Of course, Morning Joe was out there saying, oh, it's the Russians. Okay, enough of this guy. Anyone still watching this guy and his squeeze Mika, whose daddy started the Trilateral Commission, you know, good old Zigbee? Give me a break. Please, do yourself a favor. Just say no to Joe, right? Headline, Jeffrey Epstein dead in apparent suicide. Not sure how they got on the suicide issue, and we're going to talk about this. Because as a physician and someone who practiced medicine for 32 years, I think I can give you a little different insight that you might get somewhere else. Jeffrey Epstein has died after having reportedly committed suicide in his jail cell. Not sure how they came to that conclusion that quick. According to multiple news reports, after a gurney, not sure how you can make this diagnosis with somebody on a gurney, carrying what is believed to be Epstein was seen wheeled out of the Manhattan Correctional Center around 7:30, according to the New York Post. Now, there were a couple pictures in the New York Post of a guy who looked like Epstein, being wheeled into an emergency room, I think New York Presbyterian Hospital, okay, based on the address. There's no date on those pictures. So those pictures could have been of Epstein or someone who looked like Epstein, taken upon this first attempt he had that he had stated to supposedly family and friends was not a suicide attempt, but he had been assaulted in prison. A very common occurrence. We recently had Jimmy Boots on our Insider Insight show, one of a top detective in NYPD for decades, probably the most feared law enforcement individual in the country because he knows where all the bodies are buried, stated that someone getting assaulted, Jimmy was the one who actually arrested Berkowitz, the Son of Sam killer. Berkowitz was also assaulted in prison, actually the same one. And Jim said, I don't understand why everybody so finds it hard to believe that he would be assaulted in prison. He goes, look who's there, for gosh sakes. He goes, come on. So Epstein was out there saying, I didn't try to commit suicide. This was an assault, which probably is the reason why he was taken off suicide watch, because he hadn't tried to commit suicide in the first place. He was assaulted, right? So there's this picture, two pictures in the New York Post. It looks like somebody like Epstein. Now, there are some analysis done. It said, well, if you look at his nose, it doesn't look like a nose from the same guy that were taken in the past, pictures in the past, even recent past. And actually, I think that does hold some water. I also spoke to some folks in forensics, and for years they have told me that one of the best ways for identification of an individual is actually their ear structure, that our ear structures are all very different. And some people claim it's actually even more specific than potential fingerprint analysis. I think that's open to question. But the bottom line is the ear analysis is actually something that some folks actually have found to be very accurate. When you look at the picture of the person being wheeled in to Presbyterian Hospital by the paramedics that supposedly was Epstein, and on the morning of August 10th, 2019, there is, when you look at his previous pictures of Epstein, there is a differential in the picture of the ears structure of the person on that gurney being brought into the emergency room Saturday morning, August 10th, and pictures of Epstein when you look at his ear structure. So there's a question about, is this person really being brought into the emergency room Epstein? There's no time, date, or stamp, and obviously time, date, and stamps can be changed. As far as could it have been the first time he was brought in, or if somebody was brought in? We don't know. As a physician looking at that picture, there's a couple things. Number one, if you'll notice, he is intubated. In other words, a breathing tube was put down his throat. Okay, he was intubated. It's called intubation. Now, that means, and I doubt very seriously, that somebody was on call for the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the prison, that had the ability to intubate anyone. They're not going to have that level of expertise, someone on 24-hour call. There can be medical people there, nurses, triage nurses, maybe even physician's assistants, but there's not going to be anybody that can intubate somebody. It's highly unlikely. So what that means is that the paramedics were called, they showed up, and the paramedics who have the ability to intubate, intubated him. Now look, you don't intubate a corpse. Intubation occurs if there are some vital signs that there are some signs of life. Then to help the person breathe, a tube can be put down to gain access to the airway and security of the airway. Okay? So when we look at the pictures from the New York Post, there are some questions about who that person really is based on their nose and also in previous pictures and based on their ear structure. Nonetheless, let's assume it's Epstein. If it is Epstein, he was intubated, which indicates that he was alive when at least some form of alive, when the paramedics got there to the correctional facility. Okay. Now, this goes on, zero hedge. The 66-year-old Epstein was previously placed on suicide watch after he was found nearly unconscious inside his cell with marks on his neck, according to a Post report from late July. Mr. Epstein, the financier, indicated on sex trafficking charges last month, hung himself and his body was found this morning. Okay. So then the Bureau of Prisons puts out a report, Saturday morning, August 10th, 2019. At approximately 6:30 a.m., inmate Jeffrey Edward Epstein was found unresponsive, not dead, unresponsive in his cell in the special housing unit from an apparent suicide. Not sure how they came up with that one. At the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, New York. Life-saving measures were initiated immediately by responding staff. Fair enough. Staff requested emergency medical services. Now, they wouldn't have requested EMS if he was dead, if he had no vitals. And listen, here's what it says. Staff requested emergency medical services and life-saving efforts continued. Life-saving efforts continued. In other words, he was still alive. Life-saving efforts continued. Mr. Epstein was transported by EMS to a local hospital for treatment of life-threatening injuries. Okay, one more time. Life-threatening, not life-threatening. It's not like he was dead. Life-threatening injuries, and subsequently pronounced dead by hospital staff at the hospital. The FBI is investigating the incident. Enter a statement from Manhattan U.S. Attorney on the death of defendant Jeffrey Epstein. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman said, quote, earlier this morning, the Manhattan Correctional Center confirmed that Jeffrey Epstein, who faced charges brought by this office on engaging in the sex trafficking of minors, had been found unresponsive, not dead, unresponsive in his cell and was pronounced dead shortly thereafter of an apparent suicide at the hospital. Today's events are disturbing and we are deeply aware of their potential to present yet another hurdle to giving Epstein's many victims their day in court. To those brave young women who have already come forward and to the many others who have yet to do so, let me reiterate that we remain committed to standing for you, and our investigation of the conduct charge in the indictment, which included a conspiracy count, remains ongoing, end quote. Now, that's going to take us to the following. So what happened here? Okay, let me start with this, and we're going to go into this in more detail in part 2. As a physician, when someone is brought into the emergency room, okay, and that person is at death's door, the question is this potential situation at hand and someone that is knocking on death's door, is this from natural causes? Is it from accidental causes? Is it from the suicide attempt? Or is it homicide? Did somebody try to murder this individual? Okay. With Epstein, could this be natural? You bet it could be natural. 66-year-old guy, stressful situation. God knows how much coke he put up his nose, how much alcohol he drank, how many other drugs he took in his entire life. Is it possible he had a stroke or what's called a myocardial infarction or a heart attack? Yeah, it's possible. Is it probable? Not so probable, but it's possible. Accidental? Don't think he fell off the toilet, hit his head, and killed himself. Take accidental off the rack. Suicide. Well, according to all these reports, it was suicide. Yet, when you hear about his cell, the fact that the ceilings were 8 or 9 feet tall, folks who were former inmates saying there is no way this guy committed suicide in this facility. None. The chance of suicide, although it's been put out by the bought-off lamestream fake media as the cause of Jeffrey Epstein's departure from the planet, I think is actually very unlikely. That brings us to homicide. And that's what we're going to get into in part 2. Now, look, I did a little work on this Metropolitan Correctional Center. The question is this potential suicide, is this like a recurrent occurrence at this place? I mean, is this like a problem happening all the time there? So, did some work nationally, overall, all prisons, all jails across the country, state, federal, local, all prisoners in all these jails and prisons, 34% of inmate deaths have been attributed to suicide. Everyone, across the board. This particular one, Metro Correctional Center, the best information I could find, there has been one death from suicide in 21 years. Since 1998, there has been one death. So this is not an event that happens every day, every week, every month, every year. No, it's an incredibly rare event. So the chance of this being a suicide, I believe, is very small. The chance of this being accidental is beyond very small. Take it off. Suicide, I think you can really shove that to the side as well. The key to focus on, was this a natural event or was this a homicidal event, a murder event? And remember, murder events, homicidal, can actually be made to look like a natural event. And that's something we're going to get into in part 2. I hope you'll join me for part 2. If not, join us at davejanda.com for the radio show every Sunday, 2 to 5 Eastern. Just stream it live at davejanda.com. We also have great content at whamradio.com. Great hosts of all of our shows. All you have to do is just go to whamradio.com. There for you 24/7. In addition, davejanda.com for the subscription side, $9 a month, I believe one of the biggest bangs for the buck, information you're not going to get from any other source. And also on the free public side of davejanda.com. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. I hope you'll join us for part 2.